MrBeast's obsessive drive to produce bigger and better content has resulted in him nearly losing his life on several different occasions. From attempting to starve himself for upwards of 30 days, all the way to him slowly suffocating himself to death underwater. Here are the times MrBeast was almost killed. Starting with the time Jimmy showed up to the Impulsive podcast with Logan Paul and Mike Malak, which today sits at upwards of 8 million views and was a huge success. However, unfortunately, the events that would proceed would make Jimmy wish he had just stayed home that day. After wrapping up the show, Jimmy and his team would hire a driver to take them on an 8-hour journey back home. However, midway through the trip, MrBeast would begin to complain about his health, stating, "Can we pull over to the gas station? I don't feel too good."
Can we pull over to a gas station? I don't feel too good.
But just before anyone could respond, the driver began to show concerning signs, as he appeared to be sitting in the driver's seat completely lifeless, bobbling his head. And no matter how much the 25-year-old YouTuber and his friends would shout at the driver asking him to wake up, their efforts would be futile, as he would lay in the driver's seat completely unconscious. Realizing the driver may have died, and if they don't act now they may join him, they began to desperately reach for the brake pedal and the steering wheel, one hand each, and thankfully were able to bring the car to a complete stop on the side of the road. Once the car had stopped, the group would take a sigh of relief, thankful of the fact that things could have been a lot worse. But just as they let their guard down, the driver would suddenly wake up and slam the gas, and the car would then crash into a concrete wall, but miraculously, everyone would survive the accident. Upon a thorough medical checkup, it was discovered that the driver had a medical condition where his heart would stop at random. Although Jimmy may have had no control over the scenario, the same can't be said about the time MrBeast would do a challenge where he would attempt to starve himself for 30 whole days. Out of any challenge he's ever done, this was undoubtedly the hardest and most life-threatening of all, even with all the medical supervision. But this challenge was different from the rest because it served a personal purpose. Despite being asked not to carry forward with this challenge by friends and family, Jimmy would say that this challenge would be the remedy to a lifelong, potentially fatal illness he's been battling: Crohn's disease. The challenge would begin with MrBeast claiming that the first week went by relatively easily, with the only major symptom being a little bit of exhaustion. However, this positive sentiment would vanish quickly. When only a third of the way into the challenge, Jimmy would begin to badly struggle, feeling excessively hungry and almost failing several times. But surprisingly, hunger wasn't the biggest challenge Jimmy was facing. Instead, it was the extreme exhaustion, rendering him virtually immobile. On day 12, he would decide to stay strong and visit his chocolate factory. But things would only worsen when he would be hit with a wave of weakness, struggling to move and even breathe. They would be forced to immediately visit the doctor, where Jimmy would be told that although his electrolyte levels seemed normal, they were very concerned with his energy levels.
Your electrolytes still look good, but I'm a little bit concerned about your energy level.
And if things got any worse, Jimmy would be forced to abandon the challenge. But MrBeast was determined and managed to hold on to the challenge for 2 more days, until on day 14 he would break the fast after he was offered a handmade sandwich from Chef Gordon Ramsay himself. And despite his apparent failure, the subscribers were supportive. To be fair, if there was any reason to break a fast, a hand-cooked meal from Gordon freaking Ramsay is probably the best and most understandable reason out there. On August 25th of 2018, a young and hungry Jimmy attempted one of the most dangerous challenges to date, where he would completely submerge himself underwater for 24 hours and breathe through a tiny box full of air. Despite taking all the precautionary measures, not even 2 hours into the challenge, his oxygen pump would overheat, which would dramatically reduce the amount of oxygen he was getting in his air pocket. And a lack of oxygen over a prolonged period of time could result in severe brain damage and even death. 4 hours into the challenge, his skin started to show signs that something was wrong. Excessive wrinkling and a bluish tint began to appear on his hands and feet. It was clear something had to be done. And at one point, Jimmy began to lose the feeling in his legs, struggling to move them. And things only got worse from here, until he was forced to prioritize his health and abandon the challenge right in the nick of time. Because as he lifted his head above the water for the first time in hours, his legs began to spasm. What MrBeast was facing were the first stages of a potentially fatal condition, hypoxia. And if this challenge were to persist, he may not have been here today to tell the story. Now, despite MrBeast's apparent failure, he was met with quite a bit of support from his subscribers in the comment section. You could have literally just ridden, spent 12 hours straight underwater, and nobody would have been disappointed. And even some fans making jokes to lighten up the mood. Imagine MrBeast farted and the fart bubble went up through the bucket. It's clear MrBeast is willing to do anything he can to entertain his fans, even at the expense of his life. Click right here to learn about where his biggest prize winners are today. Thank you so much for watching.